Greetings, my fellow Balanites, and welcome to Balan Wonderworld. I don't normally talk about platformers as much as I would like to on this channel. Matter of fact, there's a lot of games and genres that I really enjoy that I just don't talk about. Why? Because I don't think anybody would really care. And I'm not in the business of spending weeks of my life making a video, wasting my breath and time just for people to not show up. Hooray for not caring. But make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, make no mistake, the platforming genre just might be my all-time favorite genre in gaming. Ever since I was a small child, playing the likes of Crash Bandicoot, Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2, Sonic the Hedgehog games, 2D and 3D Mario, Bomberman 64 and Hero, and we can't forget the almighty Ape Escape series. There's just something about running around in these bright, vibrant, colorful worlds, playing around with the mechanics, looking for treasures, secrets, and collectibles, while listening to some amazing music that I just can't get enough of. And we don't really get as much 3D platformers as we used to back in the days. You couldn't escape them back then, and honestly, I kinda miss it. So whenever a 3D platformer reveals itself nowadays, I'm always interested to see what it's hitting for. And that brings us to Balan Wonderworld, the latest creation from Yuji Naka. For those of you who aren't familiar with Yuji Naka, he's more or less responsible for the creation of games like Sonic the Hedgehog, Nights in a Dreams, Choo Choo Rocket, Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, Rodea the Sky Soldier, and Burning Rangers, just to name a few. And despite what some of you might think about me being some massive Sonic hater because of the Sonic Forces video, I am actually a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog and all of Yuji Naka's work. I don't think you guys realize just how much I love the Sonic the Hedgehog series. Easily my favorite platforming series out there, even if it does have some jank to it and isn't as polished as, say, Mario. I even built me a gaming PC to play more, you guessed it, Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Generations, and Sonic Racing Transformed. This time, at a glorious 60 frames per second. Yes, glorious, yes, indeed, glorious. And again, I really loved his other games as well, and I would love to play Burning Rangers someday, but no. So it was only natural that Balan Wonderworld was going to be a game that I check out. I mean, why stop now, right? Well, I finally had a chance to play Balan Wonderworld to completion. I've searched high and low for all the Balan statues as well, and put a total of 56 hours into this game. So I'm officially Balan certified, if you will. I'm sure all my gaming peers are so proud and happy to have such a hardcore Balan Wonderworld player amongst them.
I guess not.
Anyways, let's talk about it. This is Balan Wonderworld. Balan Wonderworld is the very first game from the brand new gaming company formed in 2018 under the Square Enix umbrella known as Balan Company. It was founded by Yuji Naka, who again was the creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, Nights in a Dreams, and Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. It was co-developed by Zest, most notable for games like Hey Pikmin, Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games on 3DS, and Yoshi's New Island. Not exactly the most biblical track record, but you know, I'm willing to give them a shot. They were essentially a handheld/mobile developer, so Balan Wonderworld marks the very first HD console game that Zest has ever created. Interesting enough, Naoto Oshima, most known for designing Sonic the Hedgehog and Nights, was also an important member at Zest, so this would be the first time that Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima had worked together on a game since 1998 with Sonic Adventure on the Sega Dreamcast, and that alone was enough to put Balan Wonderworld onto a lot of people's radar. Two key people responsible for making some of the most respectable and best platformers of their time, heck, even some of the best platformers just ever when competition was at its absolute strongest. And I know we live in an era where great games of the past are often looked at as just nostalgia, and then YouTubers and the games media will come out here to try to make some of the most nitpicky complaints I've ever heard in my entire life. You know, all the beeping noises are driving me up the walls, man. What's going on with the fangs, dude? What was Sega thinking? Why is there an invisible wall for a boss that takes less than 10 seconds to beat? See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, Sega. Sonic Adventure 2 was never good, in which people will then start to come to me uttering that same exact nonsense. And I just want you to know, you people, you make me sick. How did I even get here? We're supposed to be talking about Balan Wonderworld, and here I am going on some type of Sonic Adventure 2 rant. As I should. The point is, even though the target demographic for this game was clearly children, a lot of us who grew up on these games that they were responsible for during our childhood knew what they were capable of, and to see them back in action together after so long, needless to say, expectations were high. When Yuji Naka joined Square Enix in 2018, he originally wanted to make mobile games, but was encouraged by Shinji Hashimoto to make an action or platformer game. He was told this would be his one chance to make a 3D platformer with Square Enix. Production for Balan Wonderworld began that same year. Noriyoshi Fujimoto, the producer of the Dragon Quest series, was also the producer for Balan Wonderworld. The original pitch for Balan Wonderworld was to have a total of 80 costumes as its selling point, which Yuji Naka thought would have to be cut in half. But by the end of it, they were able to get all 80 costumes into the game. It would be a one-button platformer where each button would have one function and one function only, so that children wouldn't get confused while playing. Balan Wonderworld is a game that's based off of musical theater. This comes across through Balan's character design, some of the CG cutscenes, the dancing animals throughout the world, and the musical number that they'll dance to after clearing a boss. The cinematics were created by Visual Works, directed by Kazuyuki Ikumori. Originally, the game wasn't supposed to have CGI cutscenes, but Visual Works really wanted to be a part of the project, so they were brought on board. And that's a good thing too, because it's honestly the best part about this game. If it wasn't already obvious, or if you weren't paying attention and didn't hear me the other dozens of times in this video, which tends to be the case on this channel, Balan Wonderworld is a 3D platformer with 36 levels scattered throughout 12 worlds and 3 acts. So if you take 12 worlds and multiply it by 3 acts, you'll end up with the number 36. Hooray for math! Only 24 are required to beat the game, and you'll get the additional 12 after clearing the game. Each world also has its own boss, totaling 13 bosses, including the final boss as well. Each world is themed after the trauma of the inhabitants of Wonderworld, so whatever they're going through is shown directly throughout the levels. So you can do some investigative work to find out just what it is that set them spiraling downwards, and then right before the boss, it'll give you a glimpse into what really happened via a cutscene. The game lets you pick between the boy protagonist, Leo Craig, and the female protagonist, Emma Cole. So you watch a beautifully animated and directed opening cutscene, get transported into a grassy hub world, go inside the first world, and then the fun begins. As stated before, Balan Wonderworld's selling point was just how many costumes you can use in the game. These costumes give you access to a variety of different abilities, each holding one specific function. This sounds pretty cool in concept. By the way, expect me to say that a lot throughout this video, but you very quickly come to realize that when they say one function and one function only, they really mean just one function. So if you happen to get a costume that's melee based, for example, for the most part, that's all you can really do. And since every button in this game performs the same function, that means some costumes will cause you to lose the ability to jump. Now, I don't really need to explain why removing the ability to jump in a platformer is stupid, especially when jumping is such an integral part to getting around in said platformer. I think pretty much everybody can figure out the reason why. But let's talk about why removing the ability to jump in a platformer is stupid. Unless your game was designed in a way to where jumping wasn't needed in the game, for example, just being physics-based like Super Monkey Ball or Snake Pass, jumping isn't really the name of the game there, so it's okay. But suddenly removing an important function like jumping when so much of the level design is designed around jumping to progress and then being expected to get around without said ability is simply, well, yeah, I mean, it's trash. And some of the costumes here are just useless. I'm sure you've already heard about Foxbox, a costume that transforms you whenever it feels like it. And yes, it's as stupid as it sounds and looks. But there are some pretty great costumes here, my favorites being the one that enhances overall movement on the ground and in the air. Even though a lot of the melee costumes can't jump, I did find having one in my arsenal to be overall beneficial to me on my journey. Speaking of which, scattered throughout the levels are costume crystals. This is where you're going to be collecting your costumes. You'll find a key, which is usually a few feet away from the crystal, open it, and then transform into the costume. You can keep up to 3 costumes at a time, and once you collect another costume, it gets kicked out of rotation and goes back to the changing room. And here lies 2 more problems with the way they handle costumes here. For one, costumes are used as lives. Anytime you get hit, you lose the costume and get changed to another costume that you have equipped. And the costumes themselves have inventory, so if you lose your last life of that costume, if you ever want to use it again, you'll have to go back to the original level and find the costume to add it back to your inventory. And Balan Wonderworld is like a Metroidvania in a way, where certain costumes can help you find more locations and collectibles, so it gets pretty annoying. Problem 2. So you remember in Donkey Kong 64 where you would go into a tag barrel and it was all like, hey, yeah. Well, Balan Wonderworld decided to adopt that when it pertains to changing costumes. Each level has checkpoints, and while holding down any button, you can decide to go back to the hub world, a different act, or change your costume. It's just an annoying process. It would be like having to find a computer in a level in a game like Ape Escape and then access it to change gadgets, instead of simply going to the menu and picking what you want. I just really wanted to talk about Ape Escape again. I'm sorry. Since Balan Wonderworld is a collectathon platformer, it has you solving multiple puzzles and finding different ways to collect Balan statues. What works really well here is just how much freedom Balan Wonderworld gives you. While there are some specific requirements to progress, for the most part, it really doesn't seem to care how you play the game. It gives you a bunch of tools to work with in the form of costumes, but as long as you're able to make it make sense in your head and then execute it properly, the game's fine with it. Take World 9, Act 1 for example. There's this part in the level that has glass on the floor. Well, with one of the costumes that you get later on in the game, you can get that costume, bring it back to this world, and then use it to repair the mirror and then go through it. But you can also just jump on top of the mirror at the perfect spot and then airwalk your way across, get on the tracks, and then get the statue. Was this intentional? No. But even still, just using your brain and getting creative with solutions on how to platform and get Balan statues, I thought was pretty great. It's one of the many reasons I love Zelda Breath of the Wild so much. It just feels like the ultimate playground with the way you can make your tools interact with that world. Now, Balan Wonderworld isn't on that level, don't get it twisted, but I do like using costumes like the Frost Fairy, Air Cat, or Floaty Flower to get around. And lastly, throughout some of the levels are crystals that hold mini-games instead of costumes. So if you happen to come across one of these crystals, you can play one of 4 mini-games: soccer, bowling, baseball, and golf. All the mini-games here more or less play the same, just under a different sport. Lining up your shot, deciding how much strength you want to put into that shot, and then go. It's just a little pace breaker, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but even if you don't care for them, you can completely ignore them since it has no real effect on progression whatsoever, since Balan statues aren't tied to them. But whenever the opportunity presented itself, even though they weren't the greatest, I was always down to give them a go. Scattered throughout the levels are floating golden top hats that, when touched, activates Balan's Bout, a mini-game that has you doing a series of quick-time events through space or something, where you'll be punching rocks and fighting off against the main antagonist of this game, Lance. The main goal of Balan's Bout is to line up the after images with Balan's movements. If you manage to get an excellent for each sequence, you'll walk away with the Balan statue. If you get one great or lower, you no longer qualify for the statue, which is extremely annoying. So if you can no longer get the Balan statue for Balan's Bout, you have one of two options to try again. Fight and defeat the boss of that world, which will then respawn the golden hat for you to try again, or option 2, simply close out the game, boot it up, and try again. Save yourself the time and frustration and just go with option 2. Balan Wonderworld has checkpoints, so it's not like you'll have to retread the whole stage to try again. So that's what I did, and eventually I ended up getting all the Balan statues. Balan's Bout as a concept isn't so bad, even though I generally prefer my minigames to be actually playable rather than relying on QuickTime events. I don't mind it as a concept. But in execution, oh my god, it's frustrating. It probably won't be as dreadful to the average player who's not looking to get all the statues, but if you're going for a completionist run, get ready for some headaches. Balan's Bout does still reward you with a multiplier for your gems, which is good for raising the Tims. We'll talk about that shortly, so just keep a pin in that. If there is one thing I do like about Balan Wonderworld quite a bit, it's the level design. A lot of the levels here are a real joy to explore, and again, for the costumes that allow more airborne traversal, it just makes it all the more enjoyable, and you'll begin to want to explore every nook and cranny of the world looking for hidden costumes or Balan statues that were tucked away somewhere. This level sucks though. This warping farm area literally left me feeling nauseous, so I had to take a step back from the game. And it's the first level too, so I didn't have the best impressions of this game. But luckily, if you decide to stick with it, you'll be greeted by some pretty fun levels the further you get into the game. And visually, I really dig the aesthetic of a lot of these worlds. Some of these worlds definitely look better than others, but when Balan Wonderworld really tries to go for atmosphere and making these worlds feel alive, it's truly something special. I especially like the Dreamy Night effect in World 3 Act 2. I mean, just look at it. The music to go along with these stages is fantastic as well. Composed by Ryo Yamazaki, most notable for his work on Front Mission and Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, he was able to make a soundtrack that sounds kind of worldly in a way. It doesn't really sound like traditional platforming music, but that's not exactly a bad thing. Sonic Adventure 2 didn't either with its rap, rock, and jazz soundtrack, but I love it so much for that. And here, it works. I especially like how the boss music sounds straight out of Nier. And speaking of bosses, this is another thing that Balan Wonderworld gets right. After clearing the second act, you'll get a glimpse into who the character is and what exactly caused them so much trauma. And then you'll fight the physical manifestation of that trauma. And the bosses are pretty fun. It's not the most challenging boss fights. I mean, come on. This is Balan Wonderworld. You can literally dodge all the attacks in this game by simply transforming and using the invincibility frames that you'll get after transforming to your advantage. But what makes these fights so much fun is that you can get a total of 3 Balan statues if you can figure out 3 different ways to cause damage. For each one that you figure out, you get 1 trophy. It's a pretty interesting take on approaching boss fights, one that I approve of. And the bosses are designed very well here. They've got that zany look that looks like they fit right into a Knights game, which is good. And they're very expressive too. Notice how the game looks really stiff 99% of the time. Even the victory screen that's reminiscent of Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg is just... yeah, it's bad. Well, it seems like they prioritized animating the bosses over everything else. Good job. What isn't very good is how after every boss fight, the character of that world will emerge, walk up towards you, and then start dancing. I realize this is a kid's game at the end of the day, and being critical over something like this is, you know, Kind of make me seem like a grown man baby, but I don't know. I kind of hate it. Okay, no, I take it back. I do hate it. I hate it a lot. But after all is said and done, you'll get to see another beautifully animated cutscene where the person in question faces their fears and overcomes whatever problems they were facing. Hooray for overcoming problems. After clearing a level or defeating a boss, you'll be sent back to the Isle of Tims. The Isle of Tims and the Tims themselves are this game's idea of the Chow and the Chow Garden from the Sonic Adventure series, something that again I love so much. One of the biggest encouragers, I don't know if that's a word, but I'm sticking to it, of replayability that I've ever seen in a video game, something that was so beloved by many that I'm surprised Sega doesn't add to Sonic games anymore. Well, I mean, I know why Sega doesn't want to add it to their Sonic games anymore. Whenever Sega does something right with the Sonic the Hedgehog series and the reception is only positive, they never follow up on it for some reason. They just take everything people liked out of said game and remove it. Sorry for that little Sega mini rant. Well, the Tims are here now to try and fill that void that left so many of us feeling empty and worthless. Okay, I'm just being dramatic. Mostly, not really. But honestly, the Tim raising is kind of underwhelming here. What made the Chow Garden so great was just how personal it was. You were able to pick what specific type you wanted, pick a name for it, take it to school, pet it, have it compete in races or karate, take it on the go, and so on. They could even evolve, mate with another Chow to have a Chow of their own, and even die. In Balan Wonderworld, that one-on-one connection is lost with the Tims. Why? Well, look at how many of these things are clogging up my screen right now. Unless you look at a Tim's badges, which is the only real way to identify a specific Tim, it's easy for a Tim to get lost among the 100+ other Tims that will be running around and playing. Even when you throw out gems you've collected to help grow the Tims, they'll all just rush out to eat, and whoever gets there first gets the gems. What is cool here is how some of the Tims will even follow you through the stage and attack enemies, bring you items, or bring you eggs in certain locations. Actually, now that I think about it, they're more like Pikmin than they are Chow. Yeah, Tims. The Tims do serve one other purpose, and that's building the clock tower of happiness. With the gems that you get from exploring a different level, which come in a variety of different colors, you can take them back to the Isle of Tims, feed the adorable birds, and eventually they'll grow even bigger and more cuddly, and once that happens, you can throw another Tim at it and an egg will appear, this time hatching another Tim. It might even have another physical change, like it could be striped or it could have ears. And the more and more Tims you breed, and the more and more you feed them, they'll begin to spin on this wheel, thus raising a clicker. And once you've reached a certain threshold, the clock tower of happiness will continue to expand, getting larger and getting more areas for the Tims to play around in. Or trampolines will appear on the ground for the Tims to jump on. And once you've completely rebuilt the clock tower of happiness, that's it. Nothing happens. The clicker even goes away, which is dumb. But if you're Balan certified, such as myself, the game will bug out on you and then enter a first-person view with a blur filter on, so you can experience the game that way. Wow, what a game. In the Isle of Tims, there's a giant Tim statue. You can give it rainbow-colored gems, which you'll find by either re-clearing a level or by finding Tim statues hidden in a level. After collecting enough of these things and offering it to the Tim statue, the Tim will then ask for a white Tim with the crown on his head, called the Tim of Legend. You can farm this Tim by raising a giant Tim with 3 badges and a smaller Tim with 3 badges. Throw the small Tim into the bigger one and pray that it spawns. If not, you can just reset the game and try again. After getting the Tim of Legend, throw it to the statue and an even bigger, more fluffier Tim will emerge. Get on top of it and it'll take you to the top of the isle where you'll have access to the Balan costume, and this costume breaks the game like crazy. But I love it so much for that. Every level instantly becomes a joke where you no longer have to worry about and think about clever ways to get the Balan statues. It gives you like 8 jumps and you can glide for as long as you like, stripping away all the challenge from the game. This is how I chose to tackle all the Act 3 stages. Just gliding around looking for all the statues, flying over an entire stage feeling like a god among men. A god that can still take damage and lose stock, of course. But a god, nonetheless, actually enhances the overall game. It gets rid of all the little annoyances that come from not having the right costume, having the right costume, just no stock in your inventory, or having to backtrack. So everything you do just keeps the game moving and flowing a whole lot better. Even though Yuji Naka wasn't really interested in telling a story, and the game itself just throws a bunch of scenarios at the player instead of coming together to form one overall cohesive plot, believe it or not, there is actually a story to Balan Wonderworld outside of the game. It comes in the form of a book called Balan Wonderworld, Maestro of Mystery, Theater of Wonders. I don't know what possessed me to read this book. I never read books. But I'm so glad that I did, because this book holds such crucial information to Balan Wonderworld that I'm surprised that they left it all out of the game. Like the reason the animals and people disappear in the worlds isn't because the game is poorly programmed and the development team doesn't know how to make a game like so many people were saying beforehand. It's because they're supposed to be illusions trying to attract the player. Leo can transform into any costume just by thinking hard about what he wants to be and doesn't need a crystal to do it. The Tims are creatures made up of positive energy, and the Nagati, the black creatures that are under Lance, are enemies made up of negative energy. Or how about the fact that the only ones that can remove the thorns on the heart tree at the end of a level are the Tims, which is why the player stands to the side and lets the Tims do the work, because they'll hurt themselves if they try to do it. Wow, who knew? I mean, okay, it's not that cool, I'm just trying to make a case for me reading Balan Wonderworld the book. Even all the way down to the characters, their dreams, their likes, their dislikes, their overall personality, their interactions with each other, and so on, is locked behind this book. And that's kind of shocking, because in the book, the origins of Balan and Lance are addressed here as well, whereas in the game, they're just kinda there. Well, I finally finished the book from beginning to end, thus making it the very first book I've ever read in my entire life. And I won't lie, I'm proud of myself. I feel like a big boy. So without further delay, let's dive into it. So basically, Balan Wonderworld is a game about mental health, and whenever somebody is at the lowest point in their life, a random theater will appear and take them to this Wonderworld, which is basically supposed to cheer them up, give them closure, and get them moving on with their life. Outside of the two main characters, Wonderworld currently has 12 inhabitants living there, all with their own personal demons and code names. Leo Craig, aka Street Beat. After an argument with his friend years ago, he's preferred to be alone ever since. After dancing in public and is shown praise for his skills, he's afraid to get close to others in fear that they might not like him anymore, just like his ex-friend. Emma Cole, aka Fighter. She fears that people are only nice to her when talking to her, but thinks everybody hates her and is always talking behind her back. Jose Gallard, aka Scarecrow. A married man who has a son that wants to go to college and used his farming money to help fund his son's education, but one day a twister showed up and destroyed his farm, thus setting him back. Cass Milligan, aka Clock Tower Kid. After calling a cat from across the street while a car was moving, she immediately ran off thinking she killed the cat, and was too scared to look and confirm if it was dead, so now she lives with the guilt, thinking that she killed the cat. How are you Chang, a boy that dreams of flying. After one crash that sent him to the hospital, the doctors told him that if he had one more accident like that he could be paralyzed for life or worse. Bruce Stone, aka Invisible Custodian. An old man who so deeply loves his town and just wanted to keep it clean, but no matter how much he cleaned the town, more and more people would litter the streets, making all of his efforts go to waste. Yuri Brand, aka Bugsy. After studying butterflies at school, she brought some caterpillars into the class where everyone was grossed out, but they all promised to take care of them. Eventually it was just her, and name-calling ensued because she cared so much about the caterpillars. Kal Suresh, aka Checkered Knight. a chess-playing prodigy who was once champion for over a decade and had a lovely wife. One day he lost to somebody in their 20s and continued a streak where he kept losing over and over again, watching his rank drop until he eventually started having to compete with teenagers. He ended up losing to a 14-year-old boy and then fell into deep despair, not even noticing that his wife had gotten extremely sick, and then she ended up passing away. Lucy Wong, aka Madam of the Mansion, an artist who suffers from painter's block. Attilio Sassini, aka Pensive Pierrot, a man who works at an amusement park dressed up as a clown who wants to tell the princess how he feels about her but fears rejection. Fiona Demetria, aka Sea Gazer, a professional diver training to become an instructor. One day while out at sea with the dolphins, one of the dolphins accidentally knocked the regulator out of her mouth and she couldn't get her weight belt off. So she sank into the ocean and then woke up in a hospital, no longer having the desire to ever go out into the ocean ever again. Ice Glover, aka Sentinel, a firefighter who felt he didn't deserve to wear the uniform anymore after backing away from a fire while his team stood close to the fire trying to put it out. Aiden Bia, a girl who seemed to have such a happy life until one day both of her parents suddenly passed away. Now she's afraid to get close to anybody ever again in fear of losing loved ones, so she'll never love again. And lastly, Santa Hudson, aka Watcher. One day while she was studying lazuli birds and their babies, bulldozers and people with chainsaws entered the forest and started destroying the forest to build houses, chopping down all of the trees, and the nest of the lazuli birds fell with the eggs cracking. After trying to convince the lazuli birds' parents to leave and then return in the spring after winter was over, both of the birds were devastated looking at their babies and the broken nest that they couldn't abandon them, and then eventually died due to being frozen by the snow. These are the inhabitants of Wonderworld currently. Tagging along with Street Beat for most of his journey are Clock Tower Kid and Pensive Pierrot, two characters that he gets closest with in the story. Some are closer than others, but they all stop by to visit each other's worlds and have a fun old time. Here's a little bit of Wonderworld fun facts for you because I know you guys care so much and just are really eager to know. Wonderworld allows people to customize their world and add things to it however they see fit. All they have to do is just imagine it and then whoop, there it is. I need to just end this video already. None of the characters have had any interactions with each other in the real world, but they know each other's names if they simply think about it. And upon leaving Wonderworld, you lose the memories of the time that you spent there. The inhabitants also enter and leave Wonderworld at different periods in time. So a character that was, say, 5 years old, for example, when they entered Wonderworld, could emerge like 20 years before everybody else, even if they all left at the same time. Try not to think too much about it. In the book, all of the characters have amnesia and don't even remember their lives outside of Wonderworld and think they've been there forever, that it's always been their home. They also seem to suffer from PTSD, where certain imagery or even words associated with their trauma will trigger a strong sense of fear and anxiety, so they avoid saying those words whenever they visit each other's worlds. Wonderworld is overseen by someone named Lance, who is well loved by all the people in Wonderworld. One day, Street Beat starts getting flashes of a guy with a top hat and a big grin on his face with a little girl by his side and starts to get curious. So Street Beat, along with his two closest friends, Clock Tower Kid and Pensive Pierrot, go from world to world asking if the others have seen similar dreams. And they all did. Lance gets wind of this and tells them all what's happening. Apparently, this mysterious person was named Balan, and he's trying to destroy their worlds and bring them back to the real world. None of them are strong enough to defend their worlds and take him on, so he shows them his true form and tells them that he can grant them ultimate power to stand a chance by giving them negative energy. This negative energy turns them all into monsters, thus becoming the boss of their stage, which is why the characters always emerge after defeating the boss. This doesn't work on Street Beat, however, since he already got what he needed out of Wonderworld, and that was simply just friendship. Hooray for friendship. So it's up to him to bring Balance back to Wonderworld. And yes, Balan, Lance, Balance, Balan Wonderworld, available now. Street Beat eventually comes across the man with a top hat and the little girl, and they go by the name of Balan and Emma Cole, aka Fighter. It's revealed that Lance's true intentions is to keep everybody locked in Wonderworld because he hates having to say goodbye to his friends and become forgotten. Because again, the moment you leave Wonderworld, you don't remember any of your time there or the people that you met. But Balan believes that they need to use Wonderworld to overcome their struggles and then get back to reality. Also helping out for the adventure are these furry bird-like creatures called Tims, the Guardians of Happiness, while Lance possesses the Nagati, which hold negative energy. In the game, the Tims can help bring items back to the player, collect eggs, or attack enemies, but their main purpose is to destroy heart trees so that we can save everybody's hearts. So that's what you'll be doing, going from world to world, destroying heart trees, freeing their hearts, and then fighting their negative forms. Once you've done that in all 12 worlds, you'll finally face off against Lance in one epic showdown between good and evil. After defeating him, everybody gets together to say their thanks and their goodbyes, and then go back to the real world. Street Beat and Fighter give Balan a hug, which then causes him to drop crystal tears out of his eyes. And then Balan reveals that all this time he was none other than a person, I don't know, and then sends them back home as well. One thing Balan failed to do before sending them away was wiping their memory of their time spent in Wonderworld, which is forbidden. Lance then comes back to have a conversation with Balan, and it's revealed that Balan was created by Lance to try and restore order back to Wonderworld, since Lance used to be in charge before becoming corrupt. But by Balan not wiping the memories of the inhabitants and shedding a tear over their departure, Lance lets Balan know that he's becoming too attached to the people and will eventually succumb to the darkness just like he did, and that becoming the next Lance will be his fate. Back in the real world, Wonderworld seems like it was just a dream to all the people who just left. Everybody's doing better for themselves, but they just can't shake that feeling that Wonderworld was more than just a dream. But eventually, certain things start happening that causes everybody to meet up with each other. Like a fire in a forest reunites Sentinel with Watcher. After Bugsy ends up chasing a butterfly, the butterfly ends up landing on Scarecrow's shoulder, and so on. Eventually, they all end up finding each other, with the exception of Street Beat and Fighter. So they all head over to Highland Isle to watch a meteor shower called the El Trondos, and that's the location of where Street Beat and Fighter are. After asking around looking for the best dancer in town, they get some clues as to where Street Beat is. They follow him, watch from afar as he enters the theater, and then after emerging, he calls for his friends, and they all jump out to surprise him. The end. Not a bad book whatsoever, and one that I would recommend checking out. It gives a lot of context to the events of the actual game and ties up a lot of loose ends. But even just leaving the game out of the equation, on its own, it's a pretty nice, heartwarming little read. It would have been nice if they incorporated all of the stuff in the book into the actual game, as well as voice acting as well, because I'm not sure a lot of people even know the book exists, and if they do, I'm not sure many people would be willing to spend an extra $10 to read it, but what are you gonna do?
Oh my gosh, this is easily one of the worst games I have ever played in my entire life. It is just such a complete mess from start to finish. I actually paid $60 for this worthless piece of garbage.
You don't take $60 from people and then give them this in return. Once more, it's not okay.
But it's the fundamentally flawed choices behind that mediocrity that take Balan Wonderworld from bland to outright bad.
As much as it pains me to say this, Balanites, we gotta keep it real. Balan Wonderworld never stood a chance. For one, the demo killed any momentum and hype that this game had going for it, because the demo actually gives you access to the worst levels the game has to offer. A farm with this weird bending effect that has a high chance of leaving you feeling nauseous, another grassy area with an emphasis on hovering, and a flat level with the gimmick of turning gears. It's one of those games that gets better the deeper and deeper you get into it, and just by the type of game it is, the lack of certain costumes severely limits its potential overall in the demo. Visually, these are also some of the worst showcases Balan Wonderworld has to offer as well. This game doesn't really do grassy levels all that well. It also didn't help that the Nintendo Switch version was a complete mess, which should have been the console you prioritized over anything else since it's a cartoony, colorful 3D platformer, and Nintendo platforms are usually the main demographic with games like these. Even during the QuickTime events, the game would freeze, which would be a huge problem if you're trying to get all the Balan statues. So naturally, after the demo, it was now on everybody's hit list, and the videos and the hate comments started coming in. Some people were even asking for the delay of the game because they wanted it to be as good as it can be and knew what stakes were on the line here. But in the end, Square Enix decided to stay the course and release the game right on schedule without any delay. One complaint that Square Enix did address before release was the overall movement speed. The movement speed felt too slow for a lot of players, so by the full game, the character movement speed had been increased. But sadly, that wasn't enough to save it. Balan Wonderworld got destroyed by gamers and the media upon release. Review scores were extremely low with complaints of poor controls, frame rate issues, feeling outdated, and being too simplistic. The one good thing that Balan Wonderworld did have going for it was the soundtrack. We've come full circle, haven't we? It was a commercial flop, selling only 2,100 copies in Japan in its first week. It failed to hit the top 30 on the Nintendo Switch eShop in both Japan and North America, and didn't make it into the top 40 in the UK for its opening week. It didn't help that as far as Nintendo gamers were concerned, it released the same day as Monster Hunter Rise, which was not smart. It doesn't just stop there. There was also reports of the game having the ability to give people epileptic seizures from the final boss of the game, so the game had to be patched to remove it. And for those that don't know, that's not good. Yuji Naka's one chance to make a game with Square Enix with Balan Wonderworld unfortunately didn't have a happy ending. Yuji Naka ended up leaving Square Enix at the end of April and put out a message saying, "I can't talk about the reason now, but I hope I can talk about it when the time comes. As for future activities, I'm 55 years old, so I may retire." And that's where the story ends for now, which is unfortunate because by the end of it, I was satisfied with my time spent playing the game. And on the second playthrough, when I had access to more costumes, the game opened up drastically and I was enjoying my second run far more than the first. And then once I finished the novel and was able to learn about the characters, Lance, the origins of Wonderworld, what happens to everybody at the end of the story, it really started to grow on me. Now, do I expect the average person to go out there and do what I did with Balan Wonderworld and give it 2 playthroughs and read the novel? No. Honestly, recommending the base game would be pretty hard because objectively speaking, just putting feelings aside, it is a very flawed game with a lot of problems. But that being said, I also wouldn't listen too much to the hate mob either. I've been on YouTube and the internet long enough to know how these things work. Easy clicks and views. Balan Wonderworld seems like it'll go down that unfortunate and annoying route that so many other games go down, where everybody was so critical of the game upon release and acted as though the game murdered their family and was the worst game ever created, and then a couple years later, more and more people will start to come out and make a case for the game, and you'll see a more positive reception around it. But by that time, it would have been too late, and that stinks. But if for some reason Square Enix decides to revisit Balan Wonderworld, here's some things I would recommend that they do to make the sequel an overall better game. Number 1, don't hire our Zest. Having the fate of your game and your career at Square Enix lie in the hands of developers who've never made an HD console game before, and not only that, they don't exactly have the best track record just in general, was a bad decision. Maybe look for somebody like Sumo Digital or Traveler's Tales to help out, since they do a pretty good job with platformers. Number 2, stop thinking kids are stupid and incapable. Ultimately, having one button perform all the actions hurt this game so much when it could have been easily avoided. A lot of us were kids when 3D platformers first came out, and we seemed to handle it just fine, on top of getting used to moving around in a 3D environment. Even outside of 3D platformers, a lot of the games we were playing at the time that were still kids games didn't feel insultingly easy in their controls. They were simple enough so that kids could enjoy it, and in depth enough so that older players could get into it as well. Even Kirby games had more depth than Balan Wonderworld. I mean, come on. Number 3, no more side projects. Again, I honestly think Balan Wonderworld's story is interesting and a nice read, but I don't expect many people to go out there and spend an additional $10 on the book just to get a better understanding of what's going on. Matter of fact, the lack of information legit had people thinking the game was poorly developed because you could walk through NPCs and they would disappear whenever you got close. So I would just focus all of your efforts on the game itself and get rid of the storytelling without words, because these characters are just oozing personality, and I think that would do wonders for this game. Number 4, dial the costumes back and get rid of the wardrobe room. I like the idea of the costumes, and I would hate to see that go. The thing is, so many of these costumes are just clones of each other with different skins, or they just flat out suck. I would dial the number of costumes down from 80 to about 12 to 15, one main costume per world, and maybe a hidden costume on some of these stages. That way we can kill the fluff and focus on really bringing out the best of these costumes. Naturally, by doing this, the costumes would have more than one ability. Just look at Ape Escape 3 with its transformations. It isn't a lot by number, but they really knew how to make the most out of these weapons and transformations, and never left me feeling like it just wasn't enough because they were so versatile. And lastly, the Tims. The Tims have so much hidden potential, but it's never fully realized here. Just like what I said about the costumes, I would limit the amount of Tims in the world. Seeing as how you can get over 100 Tims in the hub world, it becomes really hard to connect with them. There's multiple ways you can handle this. I don't think the hub world needs to go, but I would shrink it down a bit. Sort of like Crash Bandicoot Warped. You have your portals that will take you to different worlds, but one of the portals would also be a Tim world. It would more or less work the same way Sonic handled it, but there would be no Dark Chow Garden. Then again, I guess you could raise the Nagati as well. I mean, why not? Nagati have multiple forms in the game, so I suppose they could come up with some pretty neat designs for them. But it would more or less be the same way as Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. Mini games, raising them, feeding them, having a store to buy accessories or different eggs with your gems, and so on. What you could do to take it a step further is to be able to deploy certain Tims into your adventure, just like Pokemon. So naturally, certain Tims would be stronger and faster the more you raise them. Doing all of this should make it an overall better game. It's not like there was a lot that needed to be changed, as in it was a stupid decision, never do it again. Just tweaked to get rid of a bunch of unnecessary problems and annoyances that could have easily been avoided. But that's Balan Wonderworld, a very flawed game, no doubt, and I can understand why some people wouldn't like it. But just speaking on the Xbox Series X version, since it's the one I played, I don't think a lot of the hate it got was warranted. There's some design choices that hold it back for sure, a lot of which could have easily been fixed with an update, but where it is right now, I gotta keep it real to you guys, and I gotta keep it real to myself. It's a game that I was happy I gave a fair chance. It accomplished what it needed to do for me, and that was just to have a good time with it. Jumping around, playing with the costumes, learning the mechanics, listening to some great music, and collecting a bunch of knickknacks for a couple of hours. It's not a game that will be sitting at the table of platforming legends that came before it, and that's fine, because sitting at the table with the boys and girls who were just as flawed, with some pretty wacky and unique ideas of their own that you still sort of have a soft spot for at the end of the day, isn't such a bad thing either.